List of the 10 people you should never take advice from by Jay Wilburn. Been a full-time writer since February of 2013. I have benefited greatly through my career from good advice. Many great people have set me on a good path or warned me away from bad ones. In the midst of all that wonderful guidance, I've had to navigate around terrible advice. Bad advice comes from many places, and you seldom have to ask for it. People will seek you out to deliver bad advice. I would say it comes free, but you can end up paying people for terrible advice too. People will charge lots of money for their bad advice sometimes. Then you pay dearly for following it. My golden rule of advice: never take advice from someone who doesn't like you, doesn't respect what you do, or doesn't care about your success. Allow me to explain. The guy who doesn't like you. All right, number one, the guy who doesn't like you. This is one of the 10 people you should never take advice from. Someone who doesn't know you is safer to take advice from than someone who doesn't like you. The entire point of my golden rule is that people with a bias against you are the worst people to take guidance from. They don't want you to do well. Number two, the guy who doesn't respect what you do. It's fine for people not to fully understand what you do. It's fine if they don't believe in it. If they have no respect for it, their advice isn't valuable to you. Someone who cares about you might try to steer you away from a bad choice. That's different. As a writer, if I'm self-publishing my books and I ask advice of a traditionally published author who started writing in the mid-1980s and believes Amazon stole his audience, I'm not going to get good advice on how to be successful with self-publishing. At best, he's going to steer me away from it because he doesn't like it. At worst, he's going to scuttle your career based on his baggage. Moving away from self-publishing might be right for you at some point, but a person with no respect for it can't give you an objective assessment. It's the same with ebooks, alternative platforms, live streaming, startups, new technology, or any other avenue you might be pursuing. They might not respect what you do because they don't understand it. If you need to find someone who does understand it for advice, especially if that advice is about possibly going a different direction. Number three, the guy who doesn't care about your success. This one is tricky. No one is responsible for your success except you. If you mess up, that's not ultimately the fault of the person you seek guidance from. You can make all the right moves but still fail for any number of reasons. Successful people shouldn't hang their heads because you or I couldn't replicate exactly what they did. If someone cares enough to give you advice, they should care that the advice is good. The problem comes when that person isn't invested in what they are telling you, or worse, they would prefer you failed. Sometimes these first three guys are the same person. They don't care about your success because they don't like you, don't respect what you do, and would prefer you fail. Your success is troubling to them, so they would rather steer you away from it. They don't want you to surpass them, nor do they want you to succeed in an area they can't make work. Beware. My silver rule of advice: avoid giving advice when no one asked. Unsolicited advice isn't always terrible, but it is bad far more often than advice given only when asked. Number four, the guy who is too quick to tell you what he thinks. Unsolicited versus solicited advice says something about the source. Some of the inherent value of advice comes from the nature of the person giving it. They are a better source if they are someone who isn't motivated by finding fault in you on their own. They also don't assume they know everything even when they are in a position of expert authority. The fact that they wait to be asked means they are more likely to listen, learn, and understand new situations fully before assuming they know what is best for someone else. Unsolicited advice guy can't wait to tell you what he thinks in any given situation. His evaluation of his own expertise is always very high. My bronze rule of advice: make sure you know what you are talking about and who you are talking to before you give advice, and maybe still keep your mouth shut even then. There are a lot of applications about this. Blanket advice can be wrong in a lot of specific situations. It often gets more wrong with time. Knowing who you're talking to when you give advice is important, because you might actually be talking to someone who knows more than you. You also might make wrong assumptions about where they are in their understanding. If they fail to if you fail to understand where they are exactly in what they're in what they're dealing with, then you may be insulting and telling them basic things that they already know instead of going forward to where you have something to say that might actually be useful to them. All right, number 5, the guy who isn't keeping up with innovations. Folks who give advice, for good or bad, fall in love with particular pearls of wisdom and tend to keep repeating them. If they get positive feedback on those pearls a couple times, they become hardwired into the person's thinking and are seldom reevaluated. Some advice is timeless, but a lot of the way we do it changes with ever-evolving technology, industries, economies, and practices. Advice can become less valuable over time with ever-changing conditions. The guy doing it worse than you. Be careful to understand what I mean by this. You can always learn from others, even if they are younger, newer, less experienced, less known, or less wealthy than you. Every expert you respect could have one area they know less about than you do. Someone exploring a new platform could be at the earliest stages of building their presence from the ground up. Even in those early stages, they could know more of the details and pitfalls than someone who hasn't started yet. The guy doing worse than you, however, is the one who can't get out of his own way. He is floundering, he's making unforced errors, he probably gives advice more than he takes it, he may even misrepresent how well he's actually doing. If you are truly beyond them, be cautious with what you say you should be doing. Number 7, the guy who never tried. Being risk adverse can cut both ways. We sometimes need the person who can see the dangers we are missing. The person who is never willing to take a leap, however, is always going to try to talk you out of it. Taking a risk can't always be right. Anything worth doing requires you to take a chance from time to time. You should gamble on yourself and your own success when the time is right and the opportunity presents itself. When people draw maps of territory they've never explored, they tend to fill in the blanks with monsters that aren't really there. So if you're seeking advice from someone who doesn't take chances, it's very difficult for them to see what you should be doing, and it's always going to be shaded by this idea that they don't like to take risks. All right, number 8, the guy who gives up easily, and this guy is similar to number 7. Of 10 people you shouldn't take advice from. Sometimes quitting a certain path is the right choice, and sometimes sticking with it through hard times is the correct move. It's difficult to tell the difference sometimes. If things are easy and going well, it doesn't necessarily mean you are in the right place. If things are difficult and it feels like nothing is going your way, it doesn't always mean you are meant to quit. Moments like these are the times when good advice can help. The reality is that even people who have been through it before can't tell you with 100% accuracy what you should do. The smartest people will admit that as part of their advice. The guy who has defined his life by quitting whenever trouble strikes has never reached his full potential. Whatever success he has is blunted by this tendency. Worst of all, just like with the guy who never tried, playing it safe does not guarantee you will avoid failure. Sometimes success is achieved by those who simply refuse to give up. Number 9, the guy who is bad to people. And this one's pretty important and one that we tend to overlook because if someone's good to us, we sometimes ignore how they treat others. A person who is bad to others but is nice to you is dangerous. Their advice isn't to be trusted. If they confide in you about people they don't like, it's possible they are saying the same bad things about you to someone else. Sometimes this person is described or describes themselves as tough but fair, or having no time for nonsense, or loyal to you once he knows he can trust you. There are people who are like that. But as with unsolicited advice, if this description is offered up about a person behaving badly, then it says something else about the source. If he's a nice guy when you get to know him, then he's probably not a nice guy. The worst people in the world still have a small group of people who like them. There's nothing special about that. This guy has done harm, so everything he says is shaded by that fact. His perception of himself is off, so his perception about what his life has accomplished is inaccurate. He drives good people away, so associating with him taints you with his reputation. Taking advice from a person you shouldn't want to emulate is dangerous stuff. All right, last one. This guy. You don't know me, not really. I could be any one of the dudes on this list. This whole list could be seen as unsolicited advice depending on whether you interpret the fact that you click the link as asking. Whether it's from me, someone you love, the smartest person in the world, or anyone else, you need to filter any new opinion offered up for its inherent value and its practical value to your specific situation. Certain pieces of advice offered to you might work. None of it might be good. We can learn something from anyone. Sometimes we learn what not to do. The observation of some people's lives is more valuable than anything they might tell you directly. Advice is in its own category of learning. This is what a person interprets about their own life's journey and how they see it applying to you. That perception will always be biased to some degree. You can still get good advice from some people. You must understand the subjective nature of those perceptions and interpret it all for yourself.